Hey everybody, Mark Price at devslopes.com, and we're going to dive into Java strings today. So let's go ahead and open Android Studio. You should have it installed already. Mine's already open. So I'm going to go to File, New Project on my upper monitor here, and I'll pull this down. So I'm going to call this one Strings, okay? And let's go ahead, in fact, instead of strings, I'm just going to call this my scratch pad. And what we're going to do is we'll just do multiple lessons in this scratch pad. So scratch pad, I'm saving it in the DevSlopes Android Studio project scratch pad. You can save yours wherever you want. I don't care. Next, this is all fine. Default settings does not matter. We're just doing Java today. Empty activity is fine. Main activity is fine. It's going to create a project for us. And here it is. Let's resize this so it fits my screen. Man, this thing went huge. Okay. So here's our project. We're of course not using the Android here. What we're going to do instead is I'm going to minimize this app right here. And if you don't see what I'm seeing here, you can just switch it to Android. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to File, New Module, and we're going to select Java Library. Click Next, and I'm going to call this Scratchpad is the name of the library. And the Java class name, let's just go ahead and call the first class, we're going to call this one Strings. And library name must be unique. Oh, Scratchpad, it's because I've done this already. Scratchpad project. Ooh. Or actually, we can just call this Learning Java. Learning Java, how about that? Click Finish. Going to do some thinking. Okay, here's our module now, Learning Java, and here's our strings. Let's make this bigger so you can see it here. Now, in order for this to run, we got to have kind of an entry point here. So I believe it is PSVM. It's a little shortcut here. Public static void main. This is the main entry point in a Java file. It's not the main entry point in Android. If you've played around with the apps at all where you have an onCreate, completely different. This is just pure Java. And public static void main, just think of main as the entry point where the code is going to start. And so this is where we're going to start. Let's make this smaller here because we don't care about that. In fact, I can turn that off for now. And this is where we're going to write our code, and we're going to work with strings today. So to create your first string, just type in the word string and then the name of a variable. Okay, and in this case, we're going to say truck. Now, what is a variable? What is a string? Well, we've talked a little bit about variables, but this is a variable of type string. So it stores things like letters, but not just letters. It can also store numbers. The idea behind a string is it's textual, things that you don't want to necessarily perform math operations on. So for instance, this is a string, and I have the word truck in there, but I could also have put 0, 1, and it would still be textual characters. The 0 and 1 doesn't mean anything. We're not using this for any type of math operation. Versus if I use an int, which we'll talk about later, this is a number, so I could say my bank account, right, equals 500. So that's a whole different thing. I didn't put quotation marks around this. This is an actual number that we can use, whereas this is a textual string. And strings always have quotes around them. So this is a string literal. We're literally just inserting the string that we want here. Sometimes you may not have the string literal that you want to use right off the bat. Let's say somebody is on a web form on the internet. Let's say you're filling out a survey online and you're inputting data. Well, their code might look like this, but they wouldn't have the data pre-built because it's coming from the user. So when the user clicks submit, those text values go through the web form and then go into your code here, and then you can store it inside a variable. So if we had a web form where you were entering in your vehicle, you wouldn't have this pre-built string in there, that string literal. It would come from the server through the web form, and then it would be stored here in this vehicle variable. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. And again, this is the name of the variable. It could be anything we want. I could say blah. It doesn't matter. This is the name that you're choosing, so you want it to be representative of what you're working with. In our case, we are working with vehicles, and the type of vehicle that we have here is called a truck. And we can do more. We can say string, and then we can say make equals Chevy. Always put the semicolons at the end of the statement. Again, when you write one line of code, it's considered a statement. String is model, and that's going to be equal to Tahoe. And those are just strings. Different values. They're all strings, but they all have different variable names, and each of these actually have different values. Now, can strings have the same value? Sure. I could have this equal to Chevy and this equal to Chevy, and that's completely fine because that's the value that's in the variable. But what I could not do is have two variables of the same name in the same scope. Scope is just the area in which your variables live, more or less. And so we could not do that. That would give us an error here. So they have to be unique one with another here. So make and model, but the values can be the same. And then we can do fun things with these now. We can say something like string full vehicle details equals, we can say vehicle, so we don't even have to type in the word truck because that's already stored in the variable. So we can reference the variable and it pops up automatically for us here. And we're going to say vehicle plus, and then we can put a string literal. So this is a string plus a string plus make plus another string literal plus model. So we're doing a few different things here. We're saying, hey, this variable, we want it to store the vehicle variable. So whatever's inside of this, which at this time is truck. So this is truck, and the plus sign is actually going to append it, or what we like to call concatenate. It's going to append the next thing that you write onto the end of this one, which is a string literal, just a string that doesn't have a variable attached to it. It's just we want to use it right here and right now. And notice how I put a space in front of it, because if I didn't, it would look like this. It would look like truck dash. We want it to be truck space dash. So I'm adding a space here, so the plus sign, and then when you do plus sign again for the make, okay, which is Chevy, and then the plus sign again for the colon with the spaces, so it looks nice, and then a plus sign for the model. So we're adding strings to the end of, well, what we're doing is we're adding strings together and then we're storing it here in this variable. And then what we can actually do is I can go underneath it here and type an S out. It's another shortcut, and I can press enter on this top one here for system out, system.out.println, and we can say full vehicle details. So I'm just printing that string to the console, and this is the command you'll use, system.out.println. And so if I right click this and go to run, or if I click this green button up here, we can run our code and make sure everything is working as expected. And you'll see that this run window popped open here, and sure enough, it printed to the console here, okay? To the, yeah, this is our console. And so this is truck, Chevy, Tahoe. So it looks great. Make this bigger for you here. And by the way, I'm pressing Command plus and Command minus to increase and decrease my font size. So working with strings is really easy. Like everything I just showed you is pretty much 99% of what you'll be doing with strings, which is really cool, really, really cool. But there's a few more things we can do. And this is just extras and bonuses. You may not use these as much, but they just know that they're there. And there's a lot more things that I'm not going to cover that you can do with strings. In fact, at any time, you can command click one of these here, or control click if you're on Windows, control click, and it will actually take you to the class. The code that you didn't write, but the code that the developers wrote behind Java, and you can see all the different things you can do with a string. And it's got a bunch of different function names, and this may be confusing if you're brand new to programming, but at any given time you can click to see what's inside of it and what's available to you. And so what we're going to do now is just play around with a few things. So I'm going to say string upper equals crazy beast, whatever that means. And so that's all uppercase. And then we can say string lower equals, check this out, upper to lowercase. So this is interesting. If I put a dot at the end of a string or any variable, depends on what type of variable it is, we get functions that are available to us. In this case, the nice developers of Java gave us a nice function here called to lowercase. So it will take your string, this crazy beast, and it will convert it all to lowercase, and it will give you back a new string. That's lowercase. So if I say upper dot to lowercase, put a semicolon there, and I say SOUT for system out dot print, and then I print lower, okay? This is really cool. I can click the play button here, and we should see crazy beast written in all lowercase, which it is right here. So it worked. So just by using the dot syntax here, we can call a function of string. String has different functions available to it. It's not only, you're not only putting values into it, but it offers cool functionality and things that you can do with it, which makes programming languages very powerful. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So you don't have to change it to lowercase yourself. And again, at any given time, you can command click a function to see what's available to you. And it has another function here. And then if I command click that, it goes through the whole thing. Even has the code you can look at. So if you want to get really good at coding and see what the brilliant developers did on Java, because this is some of the most reliable code ever written, you can see exactly how they're converting those into a string and how efficient it is. So if you really want to become an amazing programmer, look at the code that's happening underneath. People who are a lot more experienced and smarter than both of us have written things like this, and it's good to investigate and see for yourself. So we've just converted it to lowercase, and it definitely did work. One more thing I wanted to show you is working with numbers and strings. And we haven't talked much about numbers, but I'm going to create a variable here of type int, and we're going to call this account balance. Okay, and it equals 500. Okay, we got 500 bucks in our account. And what we want to do is we want to get that to print, but we want to print it with a string. So how would we do that? Well, I can create a new string. Let's just call this print balance. That's the name we're giving it. And we can call a function called string.format. So a format is a function of the string class, okay? And this is a static function, which may not mean much to you right now, but basically we're just using it on the class itself, meaning the word string here. We can call it directly on it without having to had a variable with this value in it yet. So we're gonna call string.format, and inside of the parentheses here, again, format's a function, we're gonna say your account balance is %d, and then comma, and then account balance. All right, let's make this a little bit smaller here. So what are we doing here? Let's take a look. So string.format, we're calling a function, we're typing in some text, and then we're putting a comma, and then we're passing in our integer variable, our account balance. Well, here's the key right here, this %d. Whenever you put a % sign inside of your string, in this format, in the side of a string format, it's going to look for that and then find the very next character after it. And the d represents integer. So you're going to say %d. If it was s, it would be another string that we would have right here. But in our case, it's a number, an integer. So what we're saying is your account balance is, and then we're expecting it to insert something right here. So it's going to replace that with whatever is in the argument over here. This is called an argument, and just a comma and the first one here. So account balance, the integer is going to be inserted into here, and then we're actually going to store it into this variable called print balance. And then all we have to do is type in s out and press enter, and we can say print balance. And so if I run this, right click and just click run, your account balance is 500. So it removed the %d and it put the account balance there, which is pretty dang cool. So literally everything I just showed you with strings is like 90% of what you'll be using them for. So you now know what all the expert programmers know to do with strings. Now, of course, there are other functions available besides format and other things. You know, if I was to type in string dot, you know, I can scroll down and look at this value of, format, copy value. There's a lot of things available to you, and you can always look at those, look online at the documentation. But that's strings. You're going to use these for the rest of your life as a programmer. And again, if you're confused at all with variables or strings, just remember that you specify the type. This is a string. Is it a string? Is it a number, an integer, right? You specify the type and then you give it a name. This is like putting a label on a bucket saying, hey, I've got a bucket of letters and I want to call it this. This is my vehicle bucket, more or less. And then we pass in data, or we actually fill the bucket with something of value. And we can reference it later by the name of the bucket, okay? Just like you might go to a library if they're still using the Dewey Decimal System, where they're like, where's the book? So they go to the letter A and they pull out all the cards. And so similar type of thing, we're just labeling a set of data, and that's how we access it. And then you can store data in it. So a lot more to come. I hope this is starting to make sense a little bit. If it's not, just watch the video again. And of course, practice is gonna make perfect. Okay, if you're not coding, you're doing it wrong. Don't go watching 5 videos one day, 5 videos the next day, and then maybe code a week later. No, every single day you need to be coding, every single day. Watch an hour video, no more than that, and get your hands on the keyboard. If you're not getting your hands on the keyboard and coding every single day, you're doing it wrong. You're not gonna learn. So take it from me. I know, I do this all the time. So that's it for now. Mark Price at devslopes.com. Let's move forward.